Kia ora koutou and shalom. It's good to see everybody here today. Thank you for coming out. I stand here today in solidarity with the Jewish and Israeli community, which has experienced the worst massacre in one day since the Holocaust. It shocks me that so many in this country have been so quick to forget the dreadful tragedy that has befallen the Jewish people, even while bodies are still being identified. A task so difficult because of the disfigurement of bodies, burnt and dismembered. The world has been quick to move on, some even denying this terrible pogrom occurred, others demanding to see evidence of the brutality. 230 people that we see their faces here today are still being held captive by Hamas, including 40 children, babies, the elderly, the handicapped. And people have the audacity to suggest or imply that the depraved slaughter of innocent babies, the brutal gang rape of women, Hamas's celebration and boasting is somehow justified. Have we become so blind that we can no longer discern right from wrong, good from evil, civilization from savagery? A false narrative has taken hold in some parts of this country. The claim that 7th of October is the result of 75 years of occupation and colonialist oppression. The claim that Jews are foreign colonialist occupiers practicing apartheid and genocide against the indigenous Palestinian population. This is false on every count. False on every count. Utterly false. It is, in fact, it is an inversion of reality. Jews are indigenous to Israel. It is their ancestral homeland. And thousands of years of persecution has proven that Jews need a homeland and must defend themselves. The current war has nothing to do with colonialism. This is a Middle Eastern war driven by radical Islamist fundamentalism. Hamas is open and unambiguous that its goal is to annihilate Israel. Yet the Western world ignores what Hamas states so clearly. Why is that? We have indigenous activists, academics, and politicians who sit within Western academia and the halls of power, shouting about solidarity with their indigenous brothers, saying that what Hamas did was understandable. They have no knowledge of the history and geopolitics of the Middle East and are cynically using this tragedy to further their own cause. It is a tragedy that Palestinian civilians are subject to the callous rule of Hamas. Hamas leaders live in luxury in Qatar. They have no qualms about putting their own people in harm's way. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak noted, "The terrorists murder Israeli children, then run and hide behind Palestinian children." Defeating Hamas will ultimately be good for the people of Gaza as well as the people of Israel. Hamas operatives prevent civilians evacuating to safety. They stockpile fuel for terrorist activity rather than supplying their hospitals. They set up terror bases in civilian areas. They've used Palestinian child labour to build terror tunnels, leading to the deaths of many children. What hope is there for Palestinian children when they are indoctrinated with Jew hatred, violence, and glorification of martyrdom? We New Zealand taxpayers support this indoctrination with $1 million a year going to the UN organisation UNRWA, which supports anti-Semitic curricula in the schools. Meanwhile, Israel does all it can to protect Palestinian civilians by sending warnings by various means. In the months prior to the 7th of October, Israel issued thousands of new permits for Gazans to work in Israel, and Hamas responded with a brutal massacre. That dreadful day has shown that Israel can no longer tolerate a terrorist organisation on its border, half an hour south from Tel Aviv, where the terrorist purpose in life is killing innocent people, fulfilling its charter to annihilate Israel. Arsen Otovsky, a human rights attorney, said, quote, "The pesky Jewish state, which faces such a heinous and savage enemy, remains the only democracy in the world that's condemned for acting disproportionately each time it refuses to surrender and allow its citizens to be slaughtered." We must stand with Israel in her fight against terrorism, in her fight for the values of democracy, freedom and life, in her fight for survival. We join others in calling for the release of the hostages. We call on the Indigenous people of this land to stand with the Indigenous people of Israel, the Jewish people. Along with all those of goodwill and decency, we stand with Israel and declare, Am Israel Chai. Israel lives. Thank you.